This is 3ABN Now with John and Rosemary Malkovich.
Hello, welcome to 3ABN Now. We're glad you can join us. Our visitor today is from a country that Rosemary and I really like, Thailand. And Thailand has a special part in our lives because that's where we got married and started working in the mission field. It's been an exciting journey, and there's nothing better than going out and working for the Lord in the mission field. You know, each one of us can do that. And our guest today, Mark Mason, is working in Thailand. He lives in Thailand. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you.
Sawadee ka.
Thank you.
And it's a wonderful place.
Yes, it is.
So Mark, tell us a little bit, in terms of your experience now of being there, how long in Thailand?
My wife and I only moved in November, which is about 3-4 months ago.
Okay.
So it's new for us.
It's all new for you, but you went out there before, is that right? And you started doing certain things there to prepare for these journey out there to live and work there.
Absolutely.
That's a wonderful thing to do. You know, we're each challenged by God to step outside our comfort zone. You've done that, and I'm sure the Lord's going to bless you.
First of all, I have your Bible verse that you've chosen. It's Psalm 34, verses 17 to 20. And I really like this. The righteous cry, and the Lord heareth, and delivereth them out of all of their troubles. The Lord is nigh unto them that are of a broken heart, and saveth such as be of a contrite spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivereth him out of them all. He keepeth all his bones, and not one of them is broken. What a beautiful thought that God delivers us. He helps us through our afflictions. He doesn't necessarily take them away, but he helps us through. Why does that, those verses there have such a meaning to you?
My life story sums that verse up. That verse is everything to me. It's like God inspired to write that for me. And there are people out there that will read that verse and say that's for them as well.
I think it applies to us all. We've all had times of brokenness and needing to have God lift us up.
It's interesting, the verse said, the righteous cry. And it's what God does for the righteous. We don't have a bed of roses. It's not a bed of roses. No. A Christian walk is not an easy walk. Every one of us experience difficulties, but God is always watching over us.
That's
Mark.
right.
It's just a wonderful thought. We are all in need of Jesus in our life to carry us through day by day, but we have to make that commitment.
That's right, yeah.
Even when we're not walking as close to him as he would desire us to do, he's still looking after us.
Yeah, and I think that's what is such an important thing to hold on to, and that is when I look back in my life, being abused as a child and not having a safe net to go to. And you harbour that anger and you push it out into the world and it destroys you as a person. But God decided to change me, and a great miracle took place in my life.
Well, we're going to talk about that. So let's get started.
Okay.
So where did you grow up? You have a bit of a twang there in your accent.
That's right, yes. I grew up in North London, in England.
Okay.
And my father, we didn't see a lot of him when we were a child because he had a computer company over in Kuwait. So he would only come home once every 6 weeks. And he's a very tall man, and you know, as a child, when you're small and you look up, you think, wow, I wonder if I ever get that big.
Yeah.
And, you know, life takes you on a journey, and my journey started at a very young age of my father coming home, wanting to do the right thing, but he would control everything. And if I made a mistake, I was beaten. I went through a lot of physical pain as a child because of it. And you see, as a child, you look at your parents as if they're God, because they provide everything for you. And as a child, I felt so confused. Because as a child, you've got nothing to measure against. And to me, I thought this was normal. And sure, we were brought up in a very nice home, and you know, we've travelled a lot, but, you know, love is the key. If you're not loved, what is wealth? It's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that at a young age, that money is not it. Money was never mentioned in our family and never needed to be.
So how did that affect your school years, a grade 1 through to whatever? How did you find school?
I hated school. I'm dyslexic, so learning for me was very difficult. And I went to an Adventist school, and it was difficult. It was difficult at school and it was difficult at home.
So did you finish, what do they call in England, year 12, is it? Yeah?
No, I was 2 years behind at school, and my father said, you have to leave early, otherwise you won't get into college, building college. So I left with no qualifications. I went to building college and started a bricklaying course. I didn't like that, jacked it in and went and did carpentry, which I enjoyed.
You know what? Jesus enjoyed that too, did you know?
He did.
Yeah. Now, I just want to ask you, all this time this is going on, up until the time you left school, your mum's there.
Yes.
What was her reaction in the family? What was the relationship with you and her when this was happening with Dad? I know that some viewers out there may, you know, have that question, you know, what's Mum doing during this time?
Mum was very protective. She was protective very much over me. Unfortunately, I sort of got picked on a lot by my father. One particular time, I had done something wrong and my dad took me in the bedroom and he was beating me on my back. And my mother rushed in and she jumped on my dad's back and was pulling him off. So she was very much the protector. And that was great, and that happened quite a few times. So I was close to my mother. There was a good bond there. I was fearful of my father, but I had a good relationship with my mother at that time.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have a twin brother who now lives in Melbourne, and I have a sister as well.
Okay.
Did they get the same sort of treatment?
No, I was... Look, if my brother did something wrong, he would get a beating as well, but I seemed to cop it more than the rest. Maybe...
You were the eldest, I presume?
No, I'm the middle.
You weren't. You were the middle.
I'm the middle one, yes. But look, I was always into mischief. That was me. But I didn't deserve the beatings that I got, and the boundary was stepped regarding that.
You know, it's interesting that you called your ministry Acts of Kindness Ministry. I can see where that would focus in from how you were treated. And I know that God wants to treat all of us with kindness, and He then, as a Christian, wants us to treat others with kindness. And I think that's, you know, when you look at the life of Jesus, that was prominent in everything He did.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, when I think about it, evil brings acts of unkindness. And so we live in a world where there are many acts of unkindness. But, you know, despite that all, Mark, God can still use anybody who's willing to be used. And your story, as we unfold it, shows that God is prepared to use anyone no matter what's happened to them. And that's very, very encouraging, because I know there are viewers out there who may have experiencing things right now as we're talking, many acts of unkindness, but hold on to Jesus. He will use you. Be faithful to Him.
So what happened with the situation where your father would come home? He wasn't home very often, but when he did, he was difficult towards you and the others as well. And obviously it was affecting your mother.
Yes.
I can imagine that her heart was torn.
Yeah, she, unfortunately, my father broke her nose in a fight, and one day she locked herself in the bathroom and he kicked the door down. And as kids, you know, we saw this kind of thing happening. It was tough for her. It was very hard for her, and like any woman, she just wanted to be loved. Unfortunately, at church, he was actually my best friend. You know, in life, sometimes you can find a soulmate.
Yes.
Well, I had a soulmate, and he was just a great friend and would share everything. And he's only a couple of years older than me, and I think I was about 17 and he was probably 18, 19. And then my father came to me and said, you know, they're sleeping together. And, you know, for me, my best friend at the time was my mother. And my best friend was my best friend, and I lost my soulmate, I lost my mum, and my father was violent. And I felt that I'd lost everything when that happened.
How did you survive through all that? What was your escape? How did you survive?
Well, what happened was, at that time when my mum left, I was still living at home with my father. And my brother said to me, why don't we just go away for the weekend with some friends from church, just to get away? So we went up to Norfolk, and Sabbath morning came, and all my church friends, teenagers, got dressed and went to church. And I said, I'm not going to church. And they said, okay. So I decided to go to the beach. And when I was on the beach, I met a load of children, probably about 18 kids. And we played basketball with them. And I said, look, I'm really hungry. Is there a fish and chip shop around? And they said, yeah, there is. We'll take you. So they took us up to the fish and chip shop.
Okay.
I bought 18 bags of chips for these children. Because I said to them, where are your parents? And they said, we don't have parents. We're orphans. We're from an orphanage. So I bought these chips for them, and we sat and ate them. And then I went to find my brother and my friends after church. And I said, I'd found some children that are from an orphanage. Why don't you come to the beach this afternoon and we'll meet them? And we did. And we spent some time with them. And there was a couple of kids there that said to me, will you come back and see me? I said, I will. And a couple of weeks later, when I was in when I was in London, I thought, oh, maybe I should take the train up to go and see them, which is a couple of hours on the train. And I stayed in a bed and breakfast, and I went and spent some time with the children. And we made pancakes for the staff and had a fantastic time. It was great. Then I got on the train. I went back to London, North London. And I got off the train and I walked to my father's house about 11 o'clock at night. And I knocked on the door, and my father opened the door and he said, Mark, I've decided you don't live here anymore. And I had 5 pence in my pocket, and you couldn't even get a phone call for that. In those days, they didn't have mobile phones.
Yeah.
I stood outside my father's house. There's 3 Mercedes out the front, and I'm standing there, and I'm not worth anything. I've got nothing. I've got the clothes on my back, and now I'm homeless. So I went over the road where there was a building site, and my friends that owned that, they had this barn at the back where they kept the donkeys and the animals. And I went over there and I opened up some hay, a hay bale, and I crawled inside, and I went to sleep. The next morning I woke up and I couldn't open my eyes because I'd cried in my sleep and the crystals had formed on my eyelids, and I had to break them with my fingers to open my eyes. And it was a shock that this was not a dream, this was reality. I was actually homeless. But I was blessed. I had gone through a private education, and that was my saving grace. Because now when I meet the homeless, I say, I used to be there, but you can make a choice. And I made the choice to do something with my life.
Sometimes, we don't understand why these things happen. And I know that there are viewers who don't understand what's happening to them right now. But there's one certainty. Did God play any part in your appeal for help?
At that stage, I hated God like you wouldn't believe. I hated the church, I hated its people. God was far away from me as you can imagine. I was taken in by an atheist family that showed me love and compassion. And then I went to college, and life moves on.
Yes.
And as life moves on, and I went into one relationship to another, I eventually met a girl that was a beautiful girl, was a lawyer, and she was just lovely, and I thought, this is the girl I'd like to marry. I was about 24 years of age. And I remember one day we sat down and she said to me, Mark, she said, I've got something I just want to say to you. She said, Mark, I cannot marry you. She said, I can't marry you because I can see you're dealing with a lot of childhood trauma. And I just don't want that in my marriage. And for me, that was the breaking point.
It was true, though. What she saw was true.
That's right, yeah. And unfortunately, I attempted suicide that night. I've attempted my life 6 times. I have 36 stitches in my wrist that I see every day if I'm going to put a watch on. The scars are still there. And being in that emotional turmoil, in your mind you've rejected God, and you feel rejected from your family and now someone you want to marry. Who is there else to turn to? There's nothing. So for me, life was worthless, and in my subconscious, my belief structure was when you die, you feel no pain. Was a very welcoming thought at the time. I went to the bank, I drew out a load of money, and I went to the train station and I got on the first train that came along. I didn't care where I was going. I wanted to run away from pain, people, I just wanted to get away. And the train pulled up in Scotland, in Perth, in Perthshire. And as the train was pulling in, I looked up to the right and I could see this massive cliff. And I thought, yes, I could go to that cliff and I could jump off, and my pain is finished forever. I got off the train and I went into the motel, put my stuff there, and I started to walk up that mountain. And I thought, if I just keep walking and just keep going, I know I'll be gone. And as I started to walk to the cliff, I started to get nervous and I was scared. And I ended up just stopping at that cliff and just looking around and just saying, if only the wind would change direction, I'd be gone for life. Stood there for hours. And then I decided to walk back down, and I thought, I can't understand where I am. I can't understand my thinking at the time. I was so confused with life. So I went to the library and I started to look on books on about why people want to take their life. And I could see a pattern in there.